My name is Lutz. I'm co-founder and CEO of Treely, and we are doing climate protection projects in Europe. So we're helping forest owners to maximize the CO2 storage in their forests, and by changing their forests into climate resilient forests, we're essentially helping to reach the global net zero. This started really early, already during my studies. I co-founded a snowboard school in the very early days of snowboarding. This was 1986, and we started the first snowboard school. And from that on, I basically was always, with the exception of one time, my entrepreneur with my own companies. And built up after my studies in Vienna in industrial engineering. I switched into software. And with the exception of one company, Treely is my fifth startup now, I've always been in software and got into building small companies into bigger companies and then trying to sell them. I think there are different kind of startup entrepreneurs. So one species definitely is, and I'm not criticizing that, but this is seeing an opportunity and turning this quickly into something that can quickly exit. And I'm talking about 1-2 years or something like that. Sometimes that happens. I think I'm the other type of entrepreneur. Usually my companies, I was building them for 5, 6, 7 years or even longer. And that's why in a lifetime, essentially this have been now 5 companies. And I think the motivation to build a company for an exit will fail ultimately. I think it's not possible. I mean, it happens, you can see it happen sometimes, but I think to try to do something really special and good and valuable, which then attracts the attention of a buyer, and ultimately you want a buyer, because the companies I started have always required venture capital. And venture capital is a special form of a credit, essentially, that you have to pay back with a lot of interest. And the only difference is you're not liable for that credit personally. It's a risk money, but you have to return it with 5x, 10x or more. And this usually requires a buyer in the end. And I think the big difference now with Treely, and this applies also to my co-founder Jorok, basically we decided that this time and also at this period in our lives, we wanted to make a difference on the environmental and climate side. Basically, when I started in the technical university, on the first day I said to a guy from Upper Austria, and we became immediately friends. And his father, he was a very successful industrial entrepreneur. And he became my friend and mentor. And it was a very important person for me. And when I started my first very big startup, he gave me, on the basis of a towel, where we wrote down a 3-sentence agreement, 1 million shillings back then, that's roughly 70,000 euro these days, to form a company, because I didn't have the capital. And basically we agreed that he will get X percentage of the proceeds at an exit. And 7 years later, this exit happened. And it was a really good exit, and he was totally surprised what happened to his 1 million shillings. And I really recommend everybody to look out for such persons. We are facing this huge challenge of our forests being aggressively attacked by the change of temperature. And even where we are here now in Austria currently, if you look up the mountains, you see a lot of trees, and you don't realize how affected they're gonna be. And if you just travel a little bit more south, like 2 hours from here, you will see already huge effects on these forests, where they either die from the temperature change because they don't get enough water, or be attacked by the bark beetle. And basically seeing this, and my co-founder Jodok, he realized the potential that exists to unlock essentially the storage capacity of CO2 in our region, and make a methodology that allows to do that in our region versus the Southern Hemisphere. So there are a lot of forest projects in the Southern Hemisphere, in Brazil, in Peru, and whatnot. But they are very heavily criticized, these projects. There has been enormous amount of fraud. And at the same time, these methodologies used there, you could not apply it in Europe, where you have much smaller lots. In Austria, for example, only 550 forests is more than 1,000 hectares even exist. And in 1,000 hectares in Brazil is like a joke. And so you have totally different concepts to apply for a climate protection project. And so we essentially approach forest owners and invite them to do a climate protection project of 30 years with all of their forest. And that means they apply measures in the management of the forest that allows to store more CO2 and to change the forest into a more climate resilient forest with different species and different concepts how you manage that. It's called improved forest management, that concept. And then once we have established that project, we turn this through auditing into yearly CO2 credits. And these issued CO2 credits that are issued by an auditing company are then being offered to companies in that region, ideally around the forest. And they would buy these credits to contribute essentially to their own net zero goals and their own CO2 emissions. And this money then is mandatory to be invested in the forest by the forest owner. Voluntary carbon market, this is where we are working in. So these companies really have to have their own motivation now to contribute to such an important project. And that's why we focus on companies that are regional to the forests, because we are not an anonymous CO2 ton that you can just trade somewhere for cheap. We want to be the ton of CO2 that you store where you live actually. But it's a tough journey for us, because the image is very bad for forest credits due to the fraud that happened in the Southern Hemisphere. And once people realize, okay, this is something entirely different. This is about these forests here, and it's about helping the area where we actually work and live and also benefit from the forest, then an emotional connection gets established. And this is where we basically win these contracts then. The challenge is always to get the product to a point where customers will value it and need it and want to buy it in the end. We are a for-profit impact company. We could have chosen to be a non-profit impact company, but we think for the scale that we have in mind and for the growth, so we were essentially more than doubling every year now in our third year. This year will be again more than doubling. And this is a rate, if you want to do that, then you need to have a clear business model. And the only way to attract investors' money is also when you see a clear trajectory how you get this into profitability in the end. And that requires this product focus and customer focus. I would recommend everybody to just do it. Not much can go wrong. There's not much to lose, but a lot to win. The other point, I think, is find a co-founder. It's so much better with two than with one person to do a startup. And then it's about the product and the idea of what you want to do. And what really helps there is that you do something that you have experienced, maybe a need on your own, and you have an idea of how this can be done better.